It became dark and I totally lost track of time. I had to hike back in the dark. And when I managed to get to my car, I was so exhausted, so destroyed, but so full, because this was just one of the most beautiful things I had ever seen in my life. And to stand next to it is just, to feel it and smell it and almost touch it. You shouldn't touch lava, of course. That was just incredible. And for me, this has really triggered something. This was like, I was sort of in a rut before. I sort of suffered of creative block. I didn't really know what to shoot anymore. My photography wasn't really going anywhere. And this kind of reignited everything for me.
Hey everyone, I'm Matt Payne, and this is episode 444 of F-Stop, Collaborate, and Listen, a podcast that goes far beyond camera gear with candid, in-depth conversations exploring creativity, motivation, inspiration, and the craft of photography. Each week, I sit down with professional photographers, industry insiders, and passionate creatives to dig into the why behind the work, from business and marketing to mindset and artistic growth. With a particular focus on landscape, nature, and wildlife photography, we also explore hot topics shaping the photo industry today. This week's guest is Jeroen van Nieuwenhove, a Belgian-born nature photographer and photojournalist who's built a life and career in Iceland, documenting its rugged highlands, dramatic weather, and active volcanoes with striking clarity and emotion. In our conversation, we explore his journey into nature photography, the philosophical and practical challenges of photographing volcanic eruptions, his shift into drone photography, and the ethical concerns surrounding photo workshops in Iceland. Today's episode is sponsored by FLM Tripods and Printique. FLM makes the best tripods in the game for the price. My daily go-to is the CP30 L4 II. It's incredibly stable, lightweight, and built to last. You can grab one at flmcanada.com and use the code HouseOfPayne for 10% off. Just make sure to act fast because that code expires on November 1st. And big thanks to Printique for supporting the show as well. I'll have a little bit more to say about them later on in the episode. Okay, here's my conversation with Jeroen van Nieuwenhove. All right, Jeroen, it's great to have you on the podcast, finally.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah, man, I'm a huge fan of your photography, and obviously your videos of the volcanoes in Iceland, I think, are probably the envy of every single photographer that I've ever met.
Possibly. Yeah.
You're like, yeah, they're pretty good.
Yeah, I mean, I'm quite proud of my work, at least.
No, that's good, man. If you create something really cool, you should be proud of it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Well, awesome, man. I feel like for whatever reason, the first time I became familiar with your work was through the competition I helped organize, NLPA, and I think several of your images did really, really well in like the first or second year. So it's awesome to finally be able to talk to you.
Yeah, thanks.
Cool, man. Well, for people who haven't heard of you, why don't you go to tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, so my name is Jeroen. I'm originally Belgian, and I'm not living in Belgium anymore. I've been living in Iceland for the last 9 years, on my way to my 10th year now. And I have both Belgian and Icelandic citizenship. And I work full-time as a photographer, as a landscape and wildlife photographer. So that's kind of what keeps me busy. And in the normal life, let's say, I have a 5-year-old daughter who is finding her way into photography as well. So I'm very interested to see how that's going to go. But yeah, that's in a nutshell about me.
Nice, man. So how the heck did a dude from Belgium end up in Iceland? Like, how did that all happen?
Yeah, it's a bit of a story. I have always had a big interest in Iceland, and in 2012, I finally made it to Iceland. And the reason how I made it to Iceland is probably rather unconventional. I was in the leadership of a Scouts movement where I lived. And the eldest group of kids in the Scouts movement, they kind of work the entire year doing all kinds of stuff to raise money. Like they go wash cars, help people with groceries, stuff like that, to get money to go on some kind of last international trip as members of the Scouts movement before they become part of the leadership. And it's quite interesting because they didn't really have an idea of where to go. So I was like really into Iceland, and my colleague who was with me in this group, he said like, oh, I'm very interested in the Baltic states. So we each made a presentation. And when we did the presentation afterwards, the kids, they got to choose where we would go. And I won that with a landslide victory. But what was really interesting is that I don't know if many people have this like, or are aware of like a really big pivotal moment in their lives. But for me, this big pivotal moment was this day on which it was decided that we were going to go to Iceland. And these kids basically decided the rest of my life without knowing what was going to happen next. So we went to Iceland, and the first thing we did in Iceland was to hike a 4-day hiking trail in the mountains. And this trip left a really big impression on me. Like I was just so amazed, so wowed by the nature. The trek goes through geothermal areas. It's through a desert. You're walking next to volcanoes, glaciers, you name it. You could see everything. The weather was really great, which probably also didn't help in tricking me into moving here, because it's not quite always like that.
Right.
Then I came back home and I felt like I was homesick, but homesick for my holiday destination. And this feeling didn't really go away. I think like many people have this like feeling when they come home and they're like, oh, I wish I was still on a holiday. But for me, months later, this feeling was still there. So then the year after, I went back again with a group of friends. And then when I came home from that trip, literally the same day, I booked a next trip for the next year. And before I went on that trip, I went on an impulsive trip in the winter to see the Northern Lights in between. And then I just kept going back again and again and again until a moment where I decided I'm going to move. And then basically what I did was I like things to be sort of definitive, or like I don't want it to be easy to go back to what it was like before. So I took photos of everything in my apartment, my closets, my bed, my kitchen. And I said, okay, on Saturday and Sunday, between 8 and 5, you can come and pick up whatever you want. Give me some money for it. Then I basically had everyone empty out my apartment in 2 days. And then I moved. Yeah, it was quite a whirlwind chain of events. But yeah, definitely don't regret doing it. Yeah.
That's super funny, man. Back in, I don't know, 2014, my wife and I did a vacation over Thanksgiving to Portland, Oregon from Colorado Springs, where we were from. And it was just to like, spend time somewhere different. And we got lucky like you did. Like it didn't rain at all, which is pretty unusual for November in Portland. Yeah. And we just fell in love with the city. We fell in love with the culture. We fell in love with the food. And like same thing, like I got home and I was like, let's move to Portland. And same thing. Like put our house up for sale. I got a job. Like everything happened literally within 45 days, and we moved. It was nuts.
Maybe you'll agree, but like, I think for me the most difficult decision was to decide I was going to do this, and then afterwards everything was super easy. And most people have said to me like, "Oh, wasn't it hard? Like trying to find a new life, new place to stay?" And I felt like the hardest part was the decision making, and then afterwards it's all practical.
Yeah,
practical
yeah,
stuff.
100%. Like we create, my wife and I are both very pragmatic. So like we sat down and like made pros and con lists and like checked out some books on Portland, figured out which neighborhood we wanted to live in, like looked at how much it would cost, like compared it to what we were like. Yeah, we did it was all very practical. Like, can we actually afford to do this? And then once we were I think we can do it. And it was like, okay, let's go.
Yeah, and I mean, for me, the thing was that like what made the decision really easy was that at some point I realized I didn't want to become like a 50 or 60-year-old that always had to wonder what was going to happen if I, did this.
Yes.
I wanted to try it because the worst thing that could have happened is that I would have to go back to Belgium and, start again in a place that I know. So that was, once I realized that, it was all quite easy.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. So at what point did the photography become an interest for you?
Yeah, I've always been very interested in photography. As a kid, my dad, he had a Canon AV1, not the AE1. I think AE1 is still a very popular camera with people. This is like a little bit dumbed down model of that version. And I found that in the attic in a box, and I decided we were going to go on a trip to South Africa, and I decided, oh, okay, I want to try this. We had like 2 lenses for it, and this really, I found this so interesting, and I also felt like it kept me busy a little bit, and on top of that, I was really interested in nature in general. Like I really loved watching BBC, and still do, by the way. I love watching BBC Earth, National Geographic, these kind of things, especially when it was about volcanoes. Volcanoes have always been a huge interest for me. And there are 2 people, 2 French volcanologists, Katja and Maurice Kraft, who have been very inspirational in that, because up to 1991, I think, most of the footage you see of any erupting volcano was made by these 2 people. Until they died in a horrible volcanic eruption in Japan. But yeah, this kind of made me feel like this was something that you could actually go out and see. Like they often filmed themselves standing in front of it, and you're like, okay, well, if they can do it, then someone else should be able to do it, I guess. And this has like been a very huge thing for me, to be very interested in big natural phenomenon like that. And then only until later, on my first trip to Iceland, I decided to buy my first proper digital camera, which was a Canon EOS 550D, which I used for 3 or 4 years. And that's when I really started to realize, I can probably do something with this through this exploration of Iceland. And yeah, then it became bigger and bigger of an interest to me.
Yeah, and so correct me if I'm wrong, but it sounds like when you moved to Iceland, you weren't doing the photography full time yet.
Definitely wasn't. So I was doing some photography on the side where I used to live. I actually sort of turned into the local concert and event photographer, which is something that a lot of people seem to start out with. It's a very obvious way of making money in photography, I think. And that was just like a side gig, and I used the money that I earned in that to sort of fund my trips to Iceland, because there I did the landscape photography and took photos that I then sold on exhibitions and things like that. But yeah, for me it was like, how to say it, like a necessary evil within photography, let's say. It was something that I had to do to fund my real interest.
Right.
But I'd never really did that full time. It was only until 2021, when the first eruption started here, that I managed to turn this into something that I could live off. But before that, it was very difficult. There's so many people trying to make something of themselves here in Iceland within landscape and nature photography in general, that it's quite difficult to kind of stick out of the crowd, let's say.
Yeah, for sure. Well, obviously you've made a huge name for yourself becoming associated with volcanic eruptions, and my understanding is that you've witnessed all 11 volcanic eruptions that have occurred in Iceland since you moved there. What's it been like to photograph that first major eruption in 2021, and how did it change your approach to photography?
It was both a very frustrating. It was a very emotional day, let's say, because for me this was hugely frustrating at the beginning, and then at the end you're so full that it's like it's impossible to even think like, how am I ever going to do anything in life that is better than what I just saw on this moment. And what was really interesting is that in the morning, so this, just to give you an idea, this eruption, it was a long time coming. I think the activity started in February, eventually it erupted in the middle of March, and I think it was about 6 weeks of seismicity. So everybody was like kind of waiting for something to happen, and then towards the end, activity started to slow down tremendously, and people were like, well, this is not gonna happen anymore. So I had sort of given up on it, and I had driven for the weekend, because it started on a Friday, driven for the weekend to a famous mountain in the west of Iceland, Kirkjufell, and I was going to photograph the northern lights there. Literally, as I was taking my stuff out of the car, I got a phone call from my mother-in-law who said, there is an eruption. There is an eruption beginning. And I was thinking, she's kidding. Like this is a joke or something. There hasn't been any seismicity of any kind. And turns out, something had begun. So I put everything back in the car, drove back to Reykjavik, tried to get a glimpse of it. I drove around until 4:30 in the morning, couldn't see anything. Everybody was trying to get a glimpse of it, and nobody really realized that it had started in a valley. So it was kind of impossible to see anything from the road. So I went back home. I slept about 3 hours, woke up. Then I tried to ring every helicopter company that I had been in touch with before. I had put my name on a list. Surprise, I was not the first one on the list. So many of these flights were very full. Turns out very full of influencers as well. Because if there's something you should know about Icelanders is that they do like a financial and economic opportunity. So I was at home really frustrated. And then I watched the news. And on the news, there was a press conference with the chief of police. And he said, I will never forget this. He said, we don't recommend anyone going, but if you go, then it's best to leave the car in this parking lot, and then you hike in this direction, and just take enough food and water with you. And it was like, we say no, but yes at the same time. Right. So I took all my stuff, packed up, got to this parking lot, dropped off my car, and then started walking over a lava field. It's really, really, really hard to walk there. And it kind of goes up and down. You're walking over moss, very sharp rocks. It took me about 4 hours to eventually get to the eruption. And the place I walked to doesn't exist anymore today, by the way. There's a new lava field on top of it in the meantime. And you get on top of this mountain, and then you see this teeny tiny, perfect little eruption in the valley. And it was almost like, how is this possible? Like, it's so small. So approachable that it's almost impossible that this existed as an eruption. Yeah, it was only outputting like something like 4 or 5 cubic meters of lava per second, which is very, very little for eruptions in general. And then I kind of just ran down, and all the frustration of the hours before I kind of forgot about. And I ran around and took photos, and I had this like little mental checklist of images that I wanted to take, because I've seen all these documentaries, seen all these photo books and whatnot, and I kind of ran through the checklist, and then it became dark, and I totally lost track of time. I had to hike back in the dark, and when I managed to get to my car, I was so exhausted, so destroyed, but so full, because this was just one of the most beautiful things I had ever seen in my life, and to stand next to it is just, to feel it and smell it and almost touch it. You shouldn't touch lava, of course, but that was just incredible. And for me, this has really triggered something. This was like I was sort of in a rut before. I sort of suffered of creative block. I didn't really know what to shoot anymore. My photography wasn't really going anywhere, and this kind of reignited everything for me.
No pun intended.
Well, yeah. This was, this was just so incredible. I stood there and I was like, okay, we don't know how long this is going to last. At the time they were speaking, this was maybe going to last a few hours. And eventually it lasted for 6 months, but I didn't realize that at the time. So I kept going back again and again and again, and tried to photograph this from every possible angle I could think of, using every possible lens, using my drone, doing as much as I could. And at one point, this almost became routine. Like I would just go there after work, and because I had a day job at the time, go there after work and spend until 4 at night in the mountains. And then even later, I was on paternity leave because my daughter was 1 year old at the time. And I would stay home with my daughter in the day, and then an hour later, when my girlfriend came home, I would be up in the mountains again to shoot until 4 in the morning, and then back again. And it was such a combination of extremes. It was just bizarre, but this really fueled my love for photography tremendously.
Yeah. Man, I have so many questions. So my first question is like, the first time you came up on that scene with the volcano, it looked really small. I'm just thinking to myself, like, at any moment, really, like that could erupt into something much larger. What does your risk assessment look like?
Well, one thing you should definitely understand is that I am a very safety focused person. And at that time, I was so incredibly excited that this was like a childhood dream of mine, right? Like this is something
Right.
that I've always wanted to see. And I just kind of lost myself in the moment. I just ran down there. You see all these other people who are there, and everybody's kind of walking around like they are a kid in a toy shop, and they have the credit card of mom and dad to just buy whatever they want.
Yes.
That's kind of what it felt like. There are things. I mean, I wouldn't say I did anything particularly dangerous, but standing so close and standing on top of the intrusion line, because the intrusion line is where the magma tries to come up. And if you stand in anywhere along that line at any point, more magma could break up to the surface. Of course, this doesn't, with these types of eruptions, that doesn't really happen like an explosion or something. It just, you start to see the ground steaming. And when you see that happen, you should run away as fast as you can. It's not as dangerous as most people would say it is, or think it is even, because you have many kinds of different eruptions. But yeah, we stood there next to this crater. We stood on the top of this line. Probably not the smartest thing to do at the time, but you're so excited that you kind of forget about these kind of things. And then later, when you go again and again and again, you're becoming a lot better at risk assessment, and you're like, some images are probably not worth the effort you put into them, because it could be quite dangerous. But yeah, on this first day, yeah, it's difficult to explain that feeling. But I think many photographers who see something they've been wanting to see for a long time will understand this, like feeling like a child on the inside and just being super ecstatic about something.
Yeah, I mean, as you were talking, I could feel the fear of missing out, the FOMO building up within me, and I know that's something that a lot of people have talked about in regards to these Icelandic volcanic eruptions. Is like, it seems like as soon as there's any news about them starting to happen, like everyone and their mom, especially people who are kind of seen as like influencers or whatever in the photography field, flock to that location as fast as possible, and then it gets flooded with people. And then everyone's kind of like jealous, like, oh, I wish I could just drop everything and go photograph a volcano in Iceland. Yep. How have you seen that kind of FOMO build up in people, and like, what impact has that had on the areas that you like to photograph?
Well, it's with volcanoes especially, I can totally understand, especially in the beginning. I think the first eruption was so perfect from a photography point of view. Like, it kept evolving and changing, and there were many different phases in it. And the images that came out of it were kind of mind-blowing, not just mine, but many photographers who went there took absolutely stunning images. This was also the first eruption that I'm aware of where drone photography really became a big thing.
Yes.
It was the first one where people kind of, like a Mavic or a Mavic 2 Pro, that was something that was getting increasingly more common. And you see a lot more of these new things, completely new things, because people have seen volcanic eruptions in videos and photos before, but they've never seen it from the viewpoint of a drone. And I mean, you could fly this thing almost into the crater and get an insane video of what it looks like inside of a crater, and that's something that was completely new at the time. And I totally understand that people flocked here, and especially the year after, we get another eruption like this. It's very approachable. Totally understand that. The year after, even more people come here. This was at Litli Hrútur, and I think at any given time you were there with probably 200-300 people, with many more on the way there, because it was 10-kilometer hike one way. And the thing that has bothered me a little bit is that, not that people come here to photograph eruptions. What has bothered me is that the most recent eruptions, they've happened in a area that's not so friendly to tourism. It's happening close to a town. It's happening very close to a geothermal power plant. It's happening in critical infrastructure areas. And the thing that I notice is that this, I'm almost going to call it a Disneyfication of volcanoes that has happened in those first 3 years. It has kind of ruins people's perception of volcanoes. They almost think that this is something that you can, I can just drive my car next to it and whip out my camera and take a few shots and really cool. And they forget how inherently dangerous this can be and how unique it was the first 3 years because it was so small. And now what has been happening very close to the fishing village, Grindavik, is very, very different. And I get these kind of messages all the time from people like a new eruption has started and they're like, I'm on a plane there, how can I photograph it? And it's not possible anymore because it's closed off by the police, rightfully so, because this area has become very, very dangerous because of all the seismicity. Everything is kind of broken up. If you walk anywhere close to where the eruption is, you could just fall through the ground. The ground has become so brittle.
Oh, yeah.
And this is something I'm not particularly amused by anymore, is that people forget that there is a whole human side to this and there is a whole risk assessment that needs to be made. And volcanoes are not really Disneyland. Right. Even though it seemed at first that it was like that. Anyone could go there, and Icelanders have been very generous in letting people go very close. But in recent years, that's not the case anymore.
Yeah, it's always a tough balance between access and giving, people need to understand there's places that are impacted, other people that are impacted, emergency services can be heavily impacted. Yeah. Things of that nature.
You see this with all kinds of things, forest fires. Just recently, I saw they again had to make a statement don't come and fly your drone above them because you're hindering emergency services. It seems kind of obvious, but not to everyone, apparently.
Right. Yeah, I kind of wanted to ask you more questions around this because I feel like there's kind of a fine line between people reacting to that FOMO and wanting to replicate what other people have already gotten in the past, and it kind of almost turns into this idea of bucket list tourism.
Yes. Yeah.
Let's take a quick break to talk about my favorite print lab for making photo books, Printique. If you've been following my work, you know that I recently printed a massive photography book through them, and the results blew me away. The color accuracy, paper quality, binding, everything felt dialed in and truly professional. Whether you're creating a fine art portfolio, a family keepsake, or a client presentation, Printique makes the process super easy and the results are stunning. They offer everything from hardcover books and photo albums to large format prints and wall art. I even recorded a full video review of my Printique book so you can see the quality for yourself. Check out the link in the show notes for that video. If you've been thinking about printing your work, I cannot recommend Printique enough. Give them a shot. Okay, let's get back to this week's episode. I understand that you've kind of chosen to emphasize struggle and patience and meaningful connection with the landscape in your work. How do you incorporate those sorts of things into your storytelling and photography?
Yeah, I think this has been, to circle back to the eruptions, especially when the first event in Grindavik, the fishing village, has been struck by the most recent events. When that has been happening, this was really strange to me because I've always been, I spent a lot of time at the eruptions. I tried to find ways to portray something that people hadn't seen before. Or try to do something unique in some way. And you spend a lot of time there and you look at this as something that's inherently really beautiful and you forget about the destructive side of it. And when the events towards the first eruption started building up, I was really excited. I was like, wow, we're going to see another eruption. It's going to be great. We're going to get a lot of footage. And nobody at that time really realized that this is maybe going to impact someone really badly, and that eventually happened. And this was like a constant struggle in my head between, when is it acceptable to kind of try and demonstrate that beauty? when there are people who are really, really suffering from what's been happening there. And it's a very fine line to balance. And also at the same time, I kind of got pushed into a more photojournalist kind of role because I was also with my other footage prior to the events there. I was always in the news in Belgium, for example, and they were looking for nice lava videos and something that could go viral or whatever. And then suddenly I'm their only contact person in Iceland, and now I have to start reporting on people who are packing up their stuff from their houses. They have 5 minutes to pack up everything they can carry and walk out. And that was this is very hard for me because it feels so invasive to do that. And I try to do that in a way to be as respectful as possible to the people involved. And there are some things that I've been documenting for news that I've chosen not to share on social media either, because I feel it's like too sensitive, or people shouldn't be forced to watch certain things happen again and again and again on social media. And I think that's been, for me at least, that's been a big struggle to kind of find, this kind of line between landscape photography and portraying what are like really documenting the events.
Yeah, and I feel like at least you're thinking about it, right? Like I feel like there's so many people out there that it's like a me. I gotta get the shot. I gotta go experience the volcano. I gotta go, get this for Instagram for my reels. Whereas you're like, like that's cool too, but like also I need to be thinking about what are the ethical boundaries and what does that look like?
I think it's really important, like in whatever photography you do, also landscape photography, the ethics are very important. Like how much is an image worth? Should I go and destroy part of a landscape to take a photo, for example? These are things or at least that I'm always thinking about, and everyone should be thinking about. But especially with this, like you could create a viral video of a house being torn in two. In this town, and is that respectful to the people who live there? I don't particularly think so. Even though because I also work as a journalist, I've been in positions where I could easily take a video, and some video that looks really horrible, I think if I would post it, it would probably do really well. But I don't think it's the right thing to do because. I don't know. I just want to be in a position where at the end of the day I can go to sleep and I don't have to think about, my God, what have I done to these people? It's already hard enough.
There was a forest fire here in Durango where I live in 2018, and fortunately it didn't come into town and it didn't burn a ton of structures, but it looked like it was going to be pretty problematic. And pretty early on in the process, I hiked up to this vantage point and I did some time lapsing of the fire. And my goal, on top of like, that'd be a cool time lapse to see the fire progress. But also I was like, how can I use this time lapse footage to generate awareness and also maybe like do like a fundraising event where I can get money for the people that are impacted by this? Because, even if your house doesn't burn down, if you live on a farm or a ranch or something, like you have to rehouse your livestock and all kinds of stuff happens. So that's what I did, is I chose to like use the footage to generate awareness and try to get people to donate money. But it's a tough one.
And I think like more people should use social media like this. Like it's the same what I did when November 10th, 2023 happened. This is when the town literally got ripped apart in a matter of hours. And what I started doing was I started talking to the Red Cross because they were supporting everyone who had evacuated the people from the town. And I was figuring out like how can I use my social media following to raise money to get them stuff that they need. And I can't do a lot of things, but when you're sitting on top of 200,000 followers, that's a great way to try and help them, right? One thing that, I don't want to shame anyone, but I felt not enough people were doing that. I think, it's not the most popular thing to do or whatever, but to me that felt like the right thing to do. And it's if you think about it, if 200,000 people all give $1 or €1, it's a lot of money, and it could make a real difference to people who are hit by these kind of things. And it's a bit like. For me, this is like a volcano that has given a lot, and it has taken a lot away, and it has given me a lot, and now it's maybe been my time to kind of help people in that regard. And I also try to do the same try to educate people about what's been happening there. So I use my Instagram, my broadcast channel on Instagram. I use that to teach people about volcanic activity in Iceland, because there was a lot of misinformation about what has been happening here as well. By the sounds of it, some people were even reporting in the US that Iceland was not going to be Iceland anymore. It was just going to be gone.
Oh, I know.
It's you see the weirdest things on some news channels. But yeah, for me, this is really important. It's being responsible with social media in a way.
Yeah. Well, I want to go back to that 2021 eruption. I understand that you've put together a book called New Earth, which kind of documents that eruption. Yeah. What was the process of putting the book together like, and from the emotional impact to the technical challenges of self-publishing, what was that all like for you?
Yeah, it was pretty interesting. So like now it's very easy to talk about how the process went. At the time I had no real clue, but where I think it started is when I started noticing that on the first few weeks people were going there, and you would see on social media that someone's footage did really well, some video or some photo, and you could see that everybody who was here was kind of trying to recreate the same images. And I felt this was so wrong. Like, this was such a beautiful event to me that I didn't understand why anyone would try to condense it into like this one video or one photo to kind of generate likes. And that's where it really started for me to like go there and shoot things from different angles, use a certain lens, like kind of challenge myself to document this in as many ways as possible. And after a couple of weeks, I started realizing, wow, I'm getting like a huge collection of different images from the same eruption. I was kind of documenting it from day one. At one point, I realized I could probably turn this into a book, and I didn't want to kind of do what everyone did. I went to the store and looked at all the volcano books they sell here. And what I noticed was that everything was very scientifically approached. Like a volcano book you buy here, either it's pretty photos in a book or it's like explaining what's happening there. And I felt this was such a personal thing to me that I wanted to write about what it was like to be there, what it was like to photograph it and how I photographed it. And then everything was really easy. Like, I felt like super inspired by it, that I wrote pretty much the entire book in maybe the span of 3 weeks. And I just it just kept coming. Like, I just wrote everything down. And then the difficult thing was trying to figure out when should I close the book, because while I was almost ready with it, the eruption was still going, which nobody really expected. So I was like, okay, I need to kind of try and get this on the shelves by Christmas at least. And I didn't really know how to end it. I think I took about 3 weeks trying to figure out how to kind of leave it open enough so it would make sense. And then I sent a manuscript I was about to send a manuscript to a local publisher, and they said to me in a reply, okay, yeah, we're willing to have a look at it. This was in August. We're willing to have a look at it, but if you send it to us, you cannot send it to anyone else. And we won't look at it until end of November or something. And I was like, why on earth would I do that? And I was like so proud of what I made that I was like, I'm not going to let my work kind of be scrutinized like that by some stupid publisher. That's kind of the thoughts that went through my head. And I was like, I can do this better. And I just went to a crowdfunding platform. And then that's the first time I actually used my social media reach for anything that was profitable for myself. And I said, like, okay, I have this book, I've designed everything, made everything, and I kind of just looking for money to publish it. I talked to a printing company here, and the crowdfunding was a huge success. I had no idea there was so much interest in it, and I managed to get 150% of my goal or something.
Nice.
And then everything went, quite easy. I think that the most complicated part was trying to figure out how to design the book. Like, I had made everything in like some software, and that didn't really work out very well because I'd forgotten to add a bleed around it and these kind of things. So I made all kinds of rookie mistakes, and it was a very steep learning curve. But I was so determined that sort of became easy. But yeah, I'm very proud of it, and I haven't gotten kind of the same level of inspiration since then. I am working on something, but I haven't really gotten this, like, I don't know how to explain. I had like a huge inflow of inspiration on this project.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah. How many copies did you make?
I printed 2,000.
Nice. That's awesome.
Yeah. It was like, what's the best investment? I initially planned to do 500. And then I got so much more money that I said, like, what's the best investment? I just put it in books and I can sell it endlessly.
Yeah,
and
totally.
This was a good investment because with every eruption that happened, people got interested in this book again. So it's, it has done really well.
That's awesome. Well, when we were going back and forth on Instagram, one of the things that I noticed is that it seems to me that for you, kind of the journey and the experience of photography are much more important to you than the final image. I'd love for you to maybe expand on that philosophy, especially in the context of social media culture and AI manipulation and everything we see today.
I am a very strongly opinionated person. I have very strong opinions on the use of AI and compositing and things like that. And I think the main reason why that is because I don't understand why anyone would want to spend more time behind their computer than they're already doing. And for me, it's about, like being out there and trying to see things. And in my work, everything that you see on my social media is not manipulated. I don't even use the spot healing, or very rarely I will use that. Like if it's something transient, like there's a person that walked through the frame or something, and they're super tiny, I can very easily get rid of them. But I'd rather kind of struggle a little bit in the field and try to find ways to get the shot without any human interference. And for me, this is the most interesting part about it. It's like, if you think about it, photography, to me, that's something that you do to capture memories. It's to look back at images that you made and think about this great time you had on a sailboat, or on a great time you had on top of a mountain, or visiting a volcano. And if you do that behind a computer, you generate images with AI behind the computer. You don't have a story, you don't have this emotion, you don't have this feeling behind it. And that's something that I've started focusing a lot more. And one of the moments where that really became apparent to me is that I saw this guy very early on in the first eruption. He had posted a photo of the eruption with the northern lights above it. And I was really surprised to see that.
I've seen that, yeah.
I was really surprised to see this. And I was like, how is this possible? I've been trying to go there for 4 nights or something already. And here's this guy, the only guy who managed to get this photo. And he didn't disclose that this was a composite. But when you started looking at the image, you kind of very, very quickly figure out, like, okay, he's standing on this side of the crater, and then he's looking in that direction, and the northern lights are kind of 90 degrees on top of that, and it kind of doesn't make sense physics-wise, like how this works. And he didn't really say, he's sort of, I call it like lying by omission. He's not telling you everything, and by that...
Pretty typical.
Yeah, it's very typical, I think. And, like, he's kind of letting it up to you to decide whether it's real or not, or you just assume it's real. And this is like, I just didn't understand why anyone would do that. Like, I was out there for 4 nights trying to get the northern lights above the eruption, didn't see them, and this just made me more determined. Like, I want to see what this actually looks like. And I eventually managed to see it and photograph it. And when I got this first photograph, I kind of, believe it or not, I just switched off my camera. And the reason why I switched off my camera is because I wanted to see this with my own eyes. And I think that's, for me, that's what it's about, like trying to, see things that are incredibly rare, or see things that not many people get to see them, take a photo of it, and then show other people to show them what's out there.
Yes.
And if you do that behind a computer, it's just, I don't know. I feel it's a little bit, what's it's like, you have a really nice box and there's no content in it. What's the use of the box if there's no content in it? That's kind of how I look at it.
Yeah, I mean, I think everyone knows where I stand on this particular issue, but I think for a lot of people, they're so tapped into that social media environment
Hmm.
and wanting to be seen, and they want fame and they want money, and like they see other people finding success with similar types of images, but maybe they don't have the time or the patience or whatever reason they have.
Yeah.
And so they try to shortcut it and create something out of nothing. And that's kind of their way of accomplishing and achieving the things that they feel like they need to do with their photography. And then they kind of like, obviously I'm painting with a broad brush here, but then they kind of like preface it under this kind of umbrella of like, this is my art. And like, and it's like, yeah, you, okay. Okay.
Well, I think, like you're saying something there that I've thought a lot about is like, they call it art, and I'm willing to go there. I'm willing to say
me
like
too.
this is some
Sure.
kind of digital art or something. The thing that has bothered me in recent years is that photography is kind of being annexed by all these things that are not photography. And in many cases, I see people who do compositing, and then I'm talking about really extreme things like removing the sky completely and adding stuff into the image, and then they call it photography. For me, that's not photography anymore, because you may have used the camera to capture parts of the image, but none of it is real. So I think that's kind of where I draw the line, is where none of it is real, and it may be beautiful and it may be interesting, but where's the story? Like what happened when you took this photo? And that's something that I've been focusing a lot on. I've been trying to tell people, I went there and the weather was absolutely horrible, and still I sat there and waited, and then this amazing thing happened. And that's kind of what I try to do, to make people realize like that's what it's about, really. It's not about the image that I come home with. It's about the experience of sitting there and being there.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's always interesting too. Is like these people go through these painstaking efforts to make it look as real as possible.
Yeah.
And realism that's a whole other conversation, because I mean photography isn't reality, right? Like
No.
it's a box with lines, and we choose apertures and shutter speeds that aren't the same as our eyes see the world. However, it is a mechanical process through which you can showcase something that actually did occur. Whether or not it actually looked exactly like that, maybe not, but like at least everything that is in that frame was actually in that frame. Right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I think it's just, and I guess I don't really understand the driving force of it, because likes on social media and followers on social media, it's pretty meaningless. Like it's such a, you don't grab people's attention that long for it to matter all that much. But when you get people to read a book, or you get them to read a blog or watch a YouTube video of something that you did, that's, I think, far more valuable in a way, because you're showing them the experience. You're selling them on the experience, which is far more important in photography.
Yeah, totally agree. Well, let's talk about drone photography. I feel like whenever people ask me about drone stuff, I'm like, you got to check out Jeroen's stuff. It's the best. And he has this amazing course, and like he's got it dialed in. So like, I know that you've kind of shifted over time more and more towards drone photography. I'd be curious to hear you talk a little bit about what inspired that transition and how you overcame some of the early setbacks, like crashing your very first drone.
Yeah. I crashed so I bought, my very first drone was the Mavic. Was it just called Mavic? I think just Mavic. The first one.
The Mavic 1
The
or
first-
whatever.
Yeah, the first foldable one, and I thought that was great because it fitted in my photography bag. So that's why I got it, and I flew it once, and then on the second flight I was flying it in a canyon, and I don't know exactly what happened, whether it was me or it was the wind, but it flew into a canyon wall, and I broke it badly enough for it to be completely unusable. So. Like one of the arms was broken off, and the gimbal was completely wrecked, and this kind of sort of scared me a little bit, and
Right.
I sold it for spare parts. I was like, okay, if I have 2,000 euros flying around here, and I crashed it already into a wall, that's not very good, and I sold it, and then I think it was a year later or 2 years later when the Mavic 2 came out. And that's when I decided to give it another chance, in part because it had some obstacle avoidance, I think. It wasn't very good, but it did something. And that's when I really started to deep dive a little bit more in it. And I started to understand more what I could do with it by making panoramas, for example. And it became more and more important because I felt like, especially in Iceland, there's so many places that have been photographed to death. Literally, I sometimes say this jokingly, like when I submit an image to a contest, for example, I always say, like, I feel like I'm competing against the rest of the world because everybody's coming to photograph in my backyard almost.
Right.
And it's like everybody comes to Iceland, and I understand why. It's an incredible place. But I felt like I needed to be able to do something different. So I started focusing more on drone photography because that really gives you, it's like to me, it's like a flying tripod. You can just put it anywhere in a 3D space and take a photo. So I started spending a lot more time on researching and exploring new places to photograph and new angles to shoot them in. And yeah, that's where I really started to focus into it a lot. And the reason why I eventually made this course together with Nigel Danson, I felt like it was something that a lot more people could use a bit more confidence in. Because yes. I see on photo workshops, I see a lot of people who come there and they're like in total panic flying their drone. And I want to sort of reassure them because I went through the same process. When I picked up my first drone, I crashed it into a canyon wall. And I didn't do a very good job at it. But I managed to, just by practicing and trying it again and again and again, I managed to make something out of it. And I think this, by knowing how people are, like how panicky they are and what kind of mistakes you make as a beginner, it becomes easier to teach people, to tell them what becomes more important in drone photography.
Yeah, I remember my first flight was a Mavic Air 2, and I had hiked up to this high mountain ridge with my two friends who were experienced drone pilots, and I think I had flown my drone like around like a city park one day just to make sure I understood how it worked. And
very different from a mountain.
Yes, and I had taken the Pilot Institute course on my drone, so like I knew some stuff. But I'll never forget, like, I'm holding the controller and I'm launching and my hands are like shaking and I'm like, I'm sending $2,000 like out into the world and I hopefully this works out, right? It can be very daunting.
It can be very daunting. And I think it's also like once you start to trust the technology a lot more, it becomes way easier because, these things are absolutely incredible. Like they are
amazing
technological marvels. And the things that I've put my drone through, not just flying over a volcano or something, but also flying in high wind and rain, it's just incredible how they just work and they just, everything's just incredible when you use it. And once you start to trust that, you become a lot less nervous.
And you do all kinds of stuff. You're like, it's good, we're good. You're confident, almost like a little too confident sometimes for me. Anyway.
Yeah, I think many people go through that phase where it's like first you're really panicky, then you start to figure out, it's going pretty well. Then you get really cocky about it, and then something happens. Maybe you crash it or you break a propeller or something, and then you kind of dial back the confidence a little bit.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about the drone course that you're referring to. Mm-hmm. What are some of the takeaways that people will get from taking that course, especially for people who are new or nervous about flying?
Yeah, I think like the way it's made is that you don't even have to own a drone when you get the course. So one of the things that we talk about is what's important for drone photography. So this whole course is completely focused on drone photography, which is something that not many people are too focused on. It's usually always video. And we focus a lot on what is important when you buy a drone for photographs, sensor sizes and other specifications, these kind of things. Like basic flying, we kind of teach you everything from A to Z. And then the biggest chunk of the course is not the technical stuff and how to set settings and things like that. It's about how to do really good aerial panoramas, because that's where you can really elevate your drone photography, but also focusing on composition, because composition is very, very different using a drone. Like the basic principles are the same with regular photography, but because you don't really see the outcome of what you're doing because you're making all these panoramas, it becomes a lot more complicated. And the way we try to teach you is by sort of dissecting images that we have made, but also by showing you in the field what we are doing when we are flying, how we are researching locations. Then we go to the location, we show you the screen while we are taking the images. So we explain how we are looking at the landscape. Then we put them all together, and then we even print them. So it's basically from A to Z, everything you should know about drone photography, but explained in a way that you can actually visibly see without us actually standing there how we are doing it. And I think what was really good is when we did 2 really big chapters on like being out in the field and shooting on different locations, the conditions we are flying in are less than ideal. So I think that's something you see a lot in other courses, is that very often it's a very idyllic kind of weather or something, or everything's kind of cooperating. We decided to show you when everything is not always cooperating, to show you what you would do in these kind of situations, because I think you can learn a lot more from that than from when everything's going very perfect.
Yeah, I love that you brought up composition, because I found that once you get over the nervousness of actually flying and not crashing your drone, then it becomes like, what am I photographing, right? Like, how do I find, and it's amazing because it opens up like this whole new world of photography for you, which then can be like completely overwhelming and stressful. But it also, like, if you stick to it, I feel like it can make you a much better photographer in terms of finding compositions and learning about combining different elements that you can find in the air. Yeah. Also makes you better on the ground too.
And especially what I find quite interesting is that once you trust the technology and you realize that when you let go of the controller, this drone is not going to fall out of the sky. Right. You realize you can, like, oh, I wish this was a little bit, more prominent in the photograph, and you start to move the drone a little bit. And you can't really do that when you're shooting with a camera. Usually you're just stuck to the location that you're at, and you can move a little bit around. You can certainly not move upwards. And with a drone, you move in 3D space however you want, so you can really perfect your compositions. And because of that, I think you become much more aware of composition, because everything becomes way more intentional, because you have the freedom to move wherever. And like you said, I think it's very true that you start to see things differently with your regular camera as well.
Yeah. And I mean, it's funny because like I'll find like in fall, I love to take my drone up in fall because you can get these sweeping vistas, but then you can also get close to trees that otherwise are impossible to get close to. And it's so fun because you can be like, I need to scoot like 3 inches down and 3 inches to the left, and nope, I'm tilted a little. Like you just like finesse it, and then it's like, yes, the composition is great now.
It's almost like you have a gear tripod head in the sky. That's kind of the feeling amazing. That I have sometimes. Yeah, it's very good. Yeah, and it's I mean, and also you said something really well. I think is that people associate drones with flying very high and very far away. And you can use it for literally whatever. You could fly very close to a tree and get just an angle of something you're really familiar with that you haven't been able to shoot. Yes. And you can really revisit locations that you've been to hundreds of times and just shoot them completely differently using a drone.
Oh, yeah. It's amazing. I love it for that. It's funny because last year I was contemplating switching from the Air 2S to the Mavic 3 Pro. And of course, like in my research, like your blog came right up in my research in terms of like which controller to get and which case to get. And I was like, man, this guy's got the SEO dialed in.
I have a background in web design, and I've spent the last couple of years a lot on optimizing my website. And I'm very... I've gotten very good at drone-related stuff. For some reason, Google seems to like that very much when I publish stuff like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it was super helpful because I was like, oh, yep, I'm gonna definitely get the upgraded controller because it has better transmission and it's brighter. So like to me that was like I'm sold, right?
Yeah, it's stuff like that is really useful when it becomes. It's like these image quality is one thing, but I find like quality of life improvements that is far more important to me sometimes. So
Yeah,
I don't have to be really frustrated.
yeah, on the Air 2S, I was using an iPad with the
Yeah.
controller, and that was a really nice experience because you're basically like flying around like a 8x10 camera, which is super
Yeah,
fun.
yeah, yeah.
And I wanted to replicate that experience with the Mavic 3 Pro without having to take the time to pair it with another device. And I feel like
Yeah.
that Pro controller kind of hits that sweet spot.
Yeah, you'll like the new one then on the Mavic 4 Pro. That's like really like an iPad in your face.
Yeah,
Yeah.
well, I just got
That's
the other
how
one. So
Yeah, that's how they get you.
that's exactly.
Yeah.
Well, I wanted to ask you about another subject that I know that you're super passionate about. You've become outspoken about unlicensed or unsafe photo workshops that are occurring in Iceland more and more. What are some of the concerns that you have about that side of the industry, and what sets your approach apart?
Yeah, I think this has become quite a big issue here in the last years. There are many people who, Iceland is a very hot destination right now, especially amongst photographers. And I think, just to get this out of the way first, is I don't think anyone who is running photo workshops necessarily has like bad intentions or they are aware that they're doing something bad. But I think there are a lot of people who come here from other countries and they rent a car and then they start driving around. They have been here maybe like 4 or 5, maybe more times. They sell themselves as being an expert on the area. And the problem is there are so many rules and regulations here. And most of these workshops, and I'm going to go out on a limb here and say probably 90% of all the workshops you find online in Iceland are not running legally. And this is, you may wonder, like, oh, why is this important? And I think it's all fine when nothing happens. And the problems start when something happens. For example, here in Iceland, you need to have a commercial driving license. And you also can't just use whatever car for your workshops. You need to have a car that has a permit for passenger transport. You need to have a liability insurance, these kind of things. And what's really bad is that all these workshops are uninsured, and especially in the winter, an accident is not far away. Like you're driving on icy roads. It's very easy to slide off the road. If anyone gets hurt on that workshop, you're not insured. The people who are on the workshop are not insured. They're often not even aware of it. And I think on top of that, it's the inexperience that I've seen on some photo tours that really gets me really concerned about, being out in nature here. Like Iceland it looks like a very idyllic place, but it's a very hostile place. Like literally, some of our beaches are actively trying to kill you.
Right.
There are beaches here where you're standing on the beach and sometimes the waves come up to your feet. The next wave will come and it will be 20, 25 meters further up the beach. And if you are standing in that zone, then you're gone. That's just the reality of things. And it may sound really dramatic, but that's stuff that happens here very regularly. Not only that, like a very popular location, you have the Diamond Beach. People are standing between ice blocks. Then whoever's guiding the tour doesn't remind people that ice does indeed float on water. And once the wave comes, all the ice lifts up and it could knock you out of balance and you could just drown. And these are things, this sounds really dramatic, but this happens here in Iceland. And every year there are tourists who die in situations like that. And imagine, like, let's say, you've warned everyone and an accident occurs and then you suddenly become personally liable for whatever that accident was because you told someone to go and stand there and take photos. And you're maybe not insured, you're not running a legal operation, and that becomes quite a big problem. And in recent years, we've had a lot of nasty stories. And what has happened now is that the police is finally starting to realize that maybe we should be checking up on these kind of things a bit more. And I'm very happy they do because the only person that benefits more from having everyone run legal operations with full insurance is the people who participate on workshops like this.
Yeah, I remember maybe 2 years ago now, a year and a half ago, there was I don't remember who this was, but it was a fairly big name photographer who was running a workshop there, and I can't remember the whole story, but basically their car, like, it was on a bridge and the bridge collapsed, and it was like, because they were using a vehicle that was too heavy for that bridge or something like that. Yeah. And then, like, I remember maybe like almost a decade ago, this really famous Instagram photographer did like a whole series of photos with him, like on top of icebergs at Diamond Beach. Like, he was on the iceberg, and the photos went viral, and everyone was like, "That's amazing!" And I'm just like, "No, that's irresponsible."
I mean, these, like, I think people don't really realize how dangerous it can be, especially in winter.
Yes.
And you know, when you go to something like the ice lagoon where you have all these icebergs, I've seen people go on top of the frozen lagoon in a wedding dress. And, you know, this is incredibly stupid because you don't know how thick the ice is, first of all. And the ice is generally not very thick because this is like a place where the tides have a huge effect. So the water is constantly moving. Imagine you stand on top of it, you sink through it. And what happens with the wedding dress? It will go... And, you know, that's not a very pleasant situation to be in. And you see this in all kinds of, you know, like, I might sound super cautious now here, but, you know, the reality is that people do die here in nature, and it happens very frequently, much more frequently than I would like. And it has become a really big problem. And the more people are running workshops here, and the more unregulated workshops that are happening here, the more likely we're going to see a big major incident. And that will have an effect on everyone who works in this business, not just the person who's running the workshop, but people will be like, why am I booking on these workshops? Are these people running a legit operation? Will I be insured? Will I be safe? And unfortunately, there are some, you know, very recently on Reddit, there was a story about a workshop that wasn't really what it was sold to be.
Vulture Labs or whatever.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And I think that's like, you know, this is not the only story that I've seen. I've seen other stories like that. And it gets me a little bit concerned about the industry as a whole, about what's going to happen when things do go wrong and something bad will happen.
Yeah, and I think I always hear people say, like, well, it doesn't affect you. Why do you care what other people are doing? It's like, hold on. It does affect me because it's like, when that kind of stuff happens, the very next thing that ends up happening is that the government implements all these new regulations that everyone has to follow that might not be easy to follow and might be cost prohibitive and also might completely eliminate your ability to make photographs that safely. Like, they just take it away from you. So that it affects me in that way. And then two, like you were saying, if the public is seeing our industry as being unsafe and irresponsible, and it's in the headlines constantly, it's going to have an impact on all of us and all of our ability to run commercial operations.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's, you know, like, it's not just about you.
Right.
I think that's exactly. the main takeaway. And, you know, positive stories never really resonate with the public as much as negative ones. And it's really, really difficult to fix a negative story like that. And it will, you know, whenever something like this will happen, then this will have such a negative impact that I worry how this will affect my business. And that's why I'm very outspoken about it. And especially towards participants, I'm very outspoken because I want people to know what kind of questions they can ask workshops organizers. Like, they should be asking about commercial driving licenses. They should be asking about insurances, and they should be able to trust that whoever's running it knows what they are doing. And unfortunately, very often that is not the case. And I know that now, for example, the Icelandic Professional Photography Association, they have started warning people, or like, warning is maybe a big word, but they've sort of they made a page where they explain all the rules and regulations involved when running workshops in Iceland. And they're also actively emailing people who are running workshops so they would be aware of the rules, because I know that until 2 years ago or something, some of the regulations, they weren't even translated from Icelandic, which I have always been also very vocal about. Like it's not just a one-way street. The government should also try to raise awareness with people who run these trips. But now all the information is available. There's really no excuse anymore to say like, oh yeah, I didn't know that you needed this or that. And another thing that is also very true is that there are many people who want to run workshops in Iceland. And that is fine. I invite anyone who wants to run a legal operation to come and run workshops here in Iceland. It's totally fine. What I don't like is that when people try to undercut the market value by running stuff illegally or not applying for permits, not applying for drone permits, I don't think that's a fair game to play. Even though you may think something is sold too expensive to your taste, it's probably not because someone wants to make a whole lot of money on this. Of course, people want to earn money, but they're not charging double your price because they want to earn double your profit. It's probably because we have a lot more expenses to make, like insurances and permits and you name it. And that often kind of gets left out of the discussion when we are talking about price.
Yeah, I'm always amazed that people aren't a little bit more, I don't know, aware of like, how come this one costs so much more than that one? It's like, well, they probably have insurance, or like maybe they're actually using a vehicle to transport you versus you being required to rent your own vehicle, or
yes,
maybe they're paying for lodging, right?
That's very common in the US, I think, running workshops where you drive yourself, right?
It is very common, yeah, which I think for most people it's the insurance part. Because I think, especially if you're going to a location that requires a permit, usually then they also require you to have a certain threshold of insurance liability, in which a lot of people can't afford.
Yeah, at that point, then I'm wondering, like, what kind of service are you selling, really? Because if you have to find your own hotel, you have to drive yourself, what are you paying for? I mean, of course, there's also the photography tuition, and you're teaching people, but the amount of time you spend with your customers becomes increasingly less when you're not even spending time together at the same hotel or you're sitting in the same car. And I find that the most valuable conversations that I have with my customers are when we are driving.
Yes.
Or we are having a meal together, or we're in the same hotel talking after a day of photography. I think that's extremely valuable in a trip.
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, I work for Munch Workshops, and all of our trips are completely all-inclusive. Like, we pay for everything, except for, like, if you want to get a bunch of beers, like, that's on you. But everything else is covered, right? And I find we keep people so busy. There's no way you're going to want to end the day with a bunch of beer, right? Like, because you have to get up in, 5 hours or whatever, so.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I think it's, I think this is very important when you're comparing workshops, is, like, what's the value proposition?
Right.
And if you then find out that you're almost paying the same amount as an actual all-inclusive workshop, but you still have to drive and you still have to find your own hotel and whatnot, then it becomes a much more expensive affair, I think.
Yeah. I don't know if you saw the post from yesterday, which when this comes out, this will be old news, but like there's a Aurora activity here in the United States. Mm-hmm. And this super well-known photographer did like this one-time sale where he charged people $6,500. And in his post, he says, "I will not offer post-processing assistance, nor will I book your accommodations. This is a luxury shoot, blah, 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 blah. I will not wait for you. You must be willing to book last minute and know that you are at the risk of nature. I will guide you to the location, but you must sign an NDA to not tell anyone where we go. And it must be booked and paid in full, no exceptions. You'll pay your own way to get there. We have no hotel for you. We're flying by the seat of our pants. And when we're done, I'll take you to the airport or the nearest hotel to drop you off."
Sounds like a great deal.
For one night, $6,500.
Yeah, I mean, this is just ridiculous.
Yeah,
I mean, I am always, when I run my workshops, I try to offer as small a group as possible, for the right price.
Yeah.
For example, this summer I'm taking people on a drone-focused workshop in the Icelandic Highlands. I can fit 3 other people comfortably in my car. And, of course, this costs a little bit more, but it's the the value proposition you get for it is much greater than what you're just describing. And I think that's something to compare as well, is that very often you'll see workshops and they advertise for like 12 to 14 people because that's how much they can cram into a minibus. And sure, that's a bit cheaper, but that also means that the person who's guiding it has to divide their attention over 14 people who are standing there. Imagine standing there with 14 people and everybody brings a drone. That's going to be very interesting as well. So it's all about, what's the best experience? And that's something that I focus a lot on, is like, how can I offer the best experience without taking the piss when charging for it? And yeah, it's a very fine balance, I find. But for me, experience is number one, obviously.
Yeah, 100%, 100%. All right, so got a couple more questions for you. I feel like anytime I've told people I've been to Iceland before, they're like, oh, like they just pepper you with questions. For someone considering a photo trip to Iceland, what's one piece of advice that they should hear from you before packing their bags?
I would say be prepared for everything.
Yes.
And by that, I mean be prepared for everything, as in dress in layers. Because I've seen, like, for example, last week it was about 20 degrees here. Tomorrow we are expecting a blizzard.
Yeah.
So, it's as we're recording this, it's June, so it's like on the edge of winter and summer now, and you can expect anything at any moment. And it's just a good idea to dress in layers and don't overpack, but be able to get warmer when you need to and dress down when you need to as well.
The one thing that I always tell people is that it's not like the United States where you have convenience stores with toilets everywhere. Like using the restroom can be a challenge sometimes.
It definitely can be a challenge, especially for women, I think.
Yes.
And especially because it's can get very, very windy here. So that poses an additional challenge. Yeah, it's I always, when I do my workshops, I always try to remind people, like this is the last toilet we'll see for the next 150 kilometers or something.
Right.
So you're at least aware of what's going to happen. But yeah, it's for such a tourism, or like for such a country where tourism is so important, it's kind of baffling how few public toilets there are, I have to say.
Then you have to pay for them sometimes too, which is different for some people.
Getting more and more common as well, parking lots that you have to pay for, and not just a little bit of money. It's usually 1,000 kroner and up. I think that's what now around $8 or $9 per car every time you stop at every little waterfall, and after a while that starts adding up.
Yeah. Well, you'd mentioned when you were talking about your book that you were kind of in the works of working on another project. Mm-hmm. What do you have coming up for you?
So it's still a little bit vague, but I'm working on something where I want to share more about the stories behind my photography. So I want to focus a lot more on this experience aspect that I've been talking about now, and I'm kind of want to blend that a little bit with aerial photography, which I've been focusing a lot on. And I'm now in like a position where I have this idea and I'm letting it like brew a little bit, and I've written down some things already, and I think at some point I'll get the right inflow of inspiration, and then it'll just become its own thing, because I'm in no rush to publish something. I don't want to just publish to publish and earn some money. I want to do something that I'm really passionate and really proud about. But that's kind of the direction I'm going in right now.
Perfect. All right, my last question. Who do you recommend for the podcast? Who are some people that our listeners need to learn about?
Well, I think, number one for me is Mr. Nigel Danson, who I work with. And I think, many people will know him. Maybe not that many people will know the story of the person behind it. And I'm very fortunate to work with him. And he's one of the people that I watched his videos when I wasn't really in the position I'm in right now. And I learned a lot from him, and I learned a lot from his approach. And I think more people should focus on what he's doing as well. And then there's Mr. Andy Mumford, who's a Fuji photographer. I really, really like his work, and I've had the privilege of running some workshops here in Iceland and Greenland together with him. I find him really inspirational. He has a very good way and a very clear way of explaining photography and composition, and a lot of his videos are they're very well done. He doesn't publish that many videos throughout the year, but when he does one, he really hits the nail on the head, I would say.
Yeah, he was a judge for NLPA. I want to say that was year 2 or year 3. I can't remember now, but yeah, I like his stuff a lot.
Yeah, he does some really amazing photography, and he's also focusing. I mean, obviously he's been to Iceland, but he's now focusing a lot on destinations that are less obvious.
Yes.
Like he's spending some time in Angola, for example, going to Japan, and trying to find beauty in locations that aren't very photography friendly yet. And he also values experience over photography, I would like to say. Yeah. And then there's one final person, if I can add, is my buddy Marco Di Marco. He's a Sicilian, and he grew up at the base of Mount Etna. And I really appreciate what he does. He's he's very knowledgeable on volcanoes. Has to be growing up next to a big ass volcano, and I really he's very knowledgeable and does some amazing things. I think most of you that are listening have probably seen his work many times before without realizing, because he's a journalist for Associated Press, and a lot of his work has been in media all over the world, especially now in the last couple of years. And I think he can probably tell you a thing or two more about volcanoes as well.
Awesome. Well, Jeroen, this has been so much fun. I had a great time learning about your journey and about the way you see the world.
Yeah, thanks a lot for having me. It was a pleasure to be here.
Of course. Thanks so much for listening to this week's episode of F-Stop, Collaborate, and Listen. If you enjoyed my conversation with Jeroen, I'd love for you to take a moment to support the podcast through the value for value model, which simply means if you get value from the show, consider returning some of that value to help keep it going. A huge thank you to our latest Patreon supporter, Gary Heppel. Your support truly helps to keep the lights on and the conversations flowing. Right now, we've seen a noticeable drop in support, and it makes a big difference if you help out on Patreon. Just go to patreon.com/fstopandlisten. You'll gain access to over 250 bonus episodes, early releases, and other fun extras for as little as $5 per month. Also, a huge shout out to our sponsors this week, FLM Tripods and Printique. I can't recommend FLM tripods enough. My CP30 L4 II has become my everyday workhorse. Visit flmcanada.com and use the code House of Payne to get 10% off your entire order. That code expires on November 1st, so don't wait. And of course, Printique continues to make beautiful, high-quality books and prints, so be sure to check them out as well. Thanks for stopping in, collaborating with us, and listening. See you next week.